For years, decades really, Hillary Clinton was condemned by the right, period. But for years, Hillary Clinton was condemned by the right for her use of a private email server to conduct government business. Became a focal point of the Republican-led House investigation into the Benghazi attacks. It resulted in a 3-year internal investigation by the State Department and a year-long investigation by the FBI. Also, a surprise letter from former FBI Director James Comey days before the 2016 election that likely contributed to her stunning defeat back then. And throughout all of that, the GOP never passed up on a single opportunity to attack Hillary Clinton, ever. Former President Donald Trump, in particular, made the term Crooked Hillary a staple of his Twitter account and turned the phrase "lock her up" into a Republican rallying cry. He even threatened to prosecute Hillary Clinton during one of their presidential debates.
If I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. There has never been anything like it. And we're going to have a special prosecutor.
I'll remind you that Hillary Clinton was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing by both the state and Justice Departments. But here we are years later with a scandal that could be a real scandal and a potential crime. We already knew that there were reports that Donald Trump had a habit of tearing up classified documents. We knew there were accusations that he literally flushed records down the toilet, both of which the former president denies. But this week, we learned that the scale of the former president's poor record management may have been a lot larger than initially suspected. Trump on Monday said the FBI had, quote, raided his Mar-a-Lago residence and even cracked a safe during a search that NBC News reports, according to a source familiar with the matter, was tied to the classified information he allegedly took from the White House in January 2021. A senior government official confirmed to NBC News that the FBI's search warrant was connected to the National Archives. The National Archives had previously revealed that Trump had to return 15 boxes of documents that were, quote, improperly taken from the White House. And during Monday's search, NBC News reports, according to a source familiar, several boxes of additional documents were seized from the residence. The former president, in a statement, called the, quote, unannounced raid prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the justice system, and the attack by the radical left Democrats who desperately don't want me to run for president in 2024. What is the difference between this and Watergate, where operatives broke into the Democratic National Committee? Well, I'm really excited. We're going to be joined right now by someone who can answer that question Donald Trump asked in that statement. Joining us now, Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and also an MSNBC contributor. Also with us, Rick Tyler. He's a Republican strategist and an MSNBC political analyst. So Jill, I'll start with you. Help us understand the significance of the FBI getting a valid search warrant to go into the house of a former president, and also how this is not like Watergate.
Well, let me start with how this is not like Watergate, because it has no resemblance. This was a search warrant issued after a judge determined that there was probable cause that a crime had been committed and that evidence of that crime was likely to be found in the premises identified in the search warrant. That is, the residence of Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. So that's a big deal. A judge finding that there's probable cause and agents leaving with more cartons, and we don't know what's in those cartons. We don't know whether the documents in those were classified or whether it was something else. Is it evidence of crimes other than a violation of the Records Act, the Presidential Records Act, or is it evidence of something to do with the many tentacles of the conspiracy to take down our government, to destroy our democracy, to prevent the transfer of power? So it's not at all like Watergate. Watergate was criminals who were hired by the White House and the Committee to Re-elect the President, breaking into private offices of the Democratic National Committee to get, well, we still don't, after all these years, know exactly what they hoped they would get, but they were installing bugging devices to overhear conversations. I don't know if they just wanted strategy or what they had in mind, but that's a crime. It is legal for the FBI to get a warrant after a judge says that they can go in, and to go in. It is not a raid. It is the execution of a search warrant. And they didn't break into his safe. They opened it because they had the right to do so. So it has nothing to do with that. But it is a big deal because to get a search warrant requires a high standard, but to get a search warrant for the premises of the former president requires even more. Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe we should all be treated the same. But I think that, in fact, any judge looking at the evidence would take into account that it is the former president and that they would have been very, very sure before agreeing to issue the warrant that there was enough evidence. So this is a big deal.
So, Rick, taking all of that legal analysis and putting it aside, I want to talk about the politics of this. The political response has been swift. Supporters of Donald Trump gathered near Mar-a-Lago. Some were aggressive towards reporters who were gathered there. What do you make of the Republican response to this, as Jill said, legally executed search warrant, not raid, of the former president's home, given the fact that we don't know exactly what this warrant is about? Is it jumping the gun just a little bit to, attack the FBI as an institution and say you're going to investigate the DOJ when you don't know all of the facts as to what led to this execution of a legal search warrant?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be concerned about here, both legally and politically. And Jill Weinbach is exactly right. And this area, like impeachment and like Watergate, overlays both the political and the legal, because there is an extraordinarily high bar to reach, because you're involving a political process which speaks to the heart of our democracy. And you want to be very careful. And the Republican Party right now is raising those issues that this is all rigged, this is all politically motivated. It's the politicization of the Justice Department. I have to believe, though, that in order for an independent judge, for the FBI director would have had to give permission for this search. It's a legal search. He calls it a raid, but it's a legal search to take place in the former president's home is extraordinarily concerning, because we don't want to live in the type of a democracy which is a thread from a banana republic, where one political party can use the power of government to hurt and impugn the other political party. So I actually hope this is not simply about documents, unless those documents are used for some blackmail purpose, or there's a extraordinary national security risk in those documents. I have to believe there's probably much more than that, and that there is a real crime that they are investigating. And I don't think it's just misplaced documents that the president just happened to get mixed into his own personal files in Mar-a-Lago.
Important analysis. And Jill, in terms of where we go from here, obviously the FBI has executed their search warrant. They left with stuff. Does it matter what they left with? If this is solely the investigation around documents, if they found the documents that they were looking for, is that airtight case? Does indictment follow? And also, if it's not that, where could this potentially go if the warrant was about maybe something else?
First of all, it isn't just misplaced documents, because remember, the FBI has already been on the premises, and there have been negotiations over the return in the past of 15 cartons of documents that were wrongfully taken from the White House. So we already know that documents were taken that are a violation of law. There have been indictments for violating that law or violating the Federal Records Act. Sandy Berger, who was a national security advisor, ended up being convicted of that. He pled guilty, and he took them directly from the archives and stole them under his clothing as he exited and hid them. But this was done more in plain sight. He took them. It was discovered. Negotiations happened. He returned some. Obviously, negotiations broke down so that they had to issue a search warrant to obtain the rest of them. And the National Archives are very serious about protecting the documents, whether they involve national security or not. Of course, if they are classified. And some of these that were taken apparently are so highly classified that the government cannot tell us in any description what was in those documents or even what the level of classification was, because the classification level is classified. So it's much more than that. I am inclined to agree, and maybe it's hopeful thinking, that it is one of the other tentacles of the conspiracy, that it's either the fake electors or it's the Georgia phone call or it's the threats against Mike Pence. But we don't know that. And so far, the reporting has been, I was on a panel last night with Betsy Woodruff Swan, who said that they have confirmed, that she and her fellow reporters have confirmed that it is related to the National Archives' desire to have all the wrongfully taken documents. Now, the fact that they are obtained, the fact that they are returned, doesn't mean that the law wasn't violated. In Sandy Berger's case, they got the documents back, but he still was penalized for it. It is a misdemeanor. It also carries a penalty of not being able to serve in public office again. That, to me, is very important. There is a possible constitutional challenge to that penalty as imposing something that the Constitution didn't impose in terms of qualifications for office. So that might be challenged, but I think more likely or more important than barring him from jail, like putting him in jail, is barring him from office because of the threat to democracy that his actions have posed.
Important things to keep in mind as we follow this breaking news and certainly a continuing story in politics. Jill Wine-Banks and Rick Tyler, thank you both for starting us off today. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.